In today's nation states, local governments have now become a critical part of nation building. If nationalism was behind the building of nation states, citizenship is behind the building of local governments.
It's not just local governments, but the level of government which controls local government, which also matters very, very importantly.
Part of this discussion on the South-South Knowledge Exchange, which we are very grateful for the government of India to host, is to bring many of you together to start discussing the issues of how to do that process in a way that is more cost-effective, where there's more involvement of the communities, where you get better results. And one of the best ways is to really try to move from an approach that is input-based to one that is output-based.
And the value of this sort of knowledge exchange really comes in bringing people together at the peer-to-peer level. So technical exchanges, the opportunity to talk about what works, how exactly you got to your program, what were the considerations, and then what didn't work.
When people are sitting together and they're talking about these elements, what did you do? How did you figure out what to do with the transfer system? And then you get into talking about what's behind it and not just the shell of it.
You will find, irrespective of the national context or subnational context, there are a lot of similarities. And again, decentralization is about details. So we have to get into details. How exactly is a grant structured? What went wrong? What got it right? These things are very important as you go. Then there are second and third generation problems, which only by sharing of experience you can understand.
We have to actually be seen as an enabling broker, and an enabling broker of exchanges between nations. And that perhaps nations learn best not when supposed international technocrats summarize those lessons, but more when we, as the World Bank, facilitate exchanges between nations.
These 5 countries are very particularly interesting because they represent a wide diversity of experiences, 5 different kind of models of decentralization. So there is India, which started this journey about 25 years back through constitutional amendments and has sort of gone a very incremental slow path. There is Indonesia, which started in 2001 with a big bang and then has sort of worked through the details. There is Nepal, which has started a very political journey through its fiscal federalism. There is Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, countries that have done more technocratic, but also political economy sensitive, detailed oriented sort of pathways.
We wanted to make it more engaging, more participative and more collaborative, and having a mix of activities.
So in terms of decentralization, what results-based approaches do is they give local governments the tools to really be able to make the changes themselves, to really work with their people, to work with their populations, to understand what it is that they need, and to, in a practical way, deliver this to them in a measurable way that demonstrates that they're meeting the needs of their people.
The first element is on the transfer system. So the decentralization and then the transfer system to the local governments. What comes next is that accountability. How do we know that the money provided from the central government is really used for the specific purposes? And then the third thing is that if they already perform well and then they already held accountable, then what's in it for them? We know that people move by incentive. So incentivizing local government is a very important key aspect.
Sri Lanka is facing a problem with regard to accountability and transparency of local bodies. And I believe that most jurisdictions have done certain actions, certain legislature, but not got things right in totality. But I think working together, we might be able to create a uniform platform of dealing with these issues.
I think what the other countries can learn from our experiences is that data is very important. So that actually, I think personally that we cannot change something that we don't understand.
There are elements from each country that are important for such an exchange. And every country has an experience of what's worked and what doesn't work. And that is a learning for the others.
What we have to be mindful in Nepal's case particularly is that we are transitioning from a unitary centralized state to a federal one. It's almost like a Big Bang approach.
Key lessons is if you really want decentralization to take off, it needs some kind of a Big Bang approach. It can be sectoral, it can be cross-sectoral. You just have faith and get it started. Second, just as you start, you have to start the capacity building. Otherwise, it will fall in between. Third, our systems are all designed for centralized governance. Everything, procurement, reporting. So that you'll have to immediately, you can't suddenly create a system for local governance. You have to have some ad hoc systems carefully thought out, which protect the interests of the citizen, the government, the audit, the legal part. So that is the way.
Really focus on institutions that build the pipes, not building the pipes themselves. So many of these cases that you have heard today, whether it's Indonesia, Bangladesh, India, all of these countries, at least these three big countries where we have been engaged for a long time, they're focused on building the institutions that build the pipe. And in the process, we've also seen that the pipes are being built better and in a better way.
We don't actually work, this project that we've done in Indonesia is an unusual one for us because mostly we're working with governments who are engaging the private sector or small scale entities to provide last mile access. So we're not doing so much this kind of government approach. So it really, our experience and our work in this is really enabling governments.
But I think the Indonesian experience, how they have a separate office which is accountable only to the president's office. So today, if you look at most jurisdictions, you set a thief to catch a thief. So there's a correlation between the monitoring body and the thief. So as a result, with regard to transparency and corruption, there is no proper monitoring process. And the use of technology and the reduction of the human face to eradicate corruption is something which was very insightful.
What's very important to remember in capacity building for local governments is that there's no cookie cutter approach. There's no one right way to do it. You can't take what's been done in Bangladesh and transplant that to Sri Lanka or to Indonesia or vice versa and say that this is exactly how it should be. So there must be a really careful examination. You can look at what's been done in other places, but then you have to really examine what are the specific context, what are the characteristics, and what is the objective of a particular project to be able to do this in a careful way.